There was a period of my life when I was much younger, when I kind of very much wanted to become a monk. There was a part of me that really was a very intense young man and pretty intense child too, but I was an intense person. And there was a part of me that felt that, there's a Hasidic saying that if you stick in the middle of the road, you'll wind up in the mud like all the rest of the horses. I didn't want to be in the middle, stuck in the middle with everybody. I kind of wanted to take something and see it till it kind of comes to its fullest expression in its most intense way. So I was drawn to extreme things, and I was very drawn to extreme religious experience and wanting to have extreme religious experience. And when I was in my early 20s, I had many extreme religious experiences because I followed a path of asceticism as a young Orthodox man, fasting and eating only at certain moments of the day and other kind of classic ascetic practices. And so when I left Judaism for almost 12 years, I was very drawn to being a monk. I went and got some pamphlets from various Buddhist monasteries. Not anything, I wasn't interested in becoming a monk in the Carmelite tradition. I don't think they would allow me, but I wasn't interested in going to Gethsemane and following the footsteps of Trappist monks, but I was fascinated by it and I read books about it. And so you might be surprised to know that a monk or some version of the monk appears in this week's Torah portion. In Parshat Naso, there is this kind of topic called the Nazarites. How many people heard of the Nazarite? Okay, a couple of Nazarite knowledgeable people. So I think my first exposure to the Nazarite was not through the Bible, but through a movie about Samson and Delilah. Probably prompted by Tom Jones. My father had Tom Jones, why Delilah, but I don't know. Somehow watched a movie about Samson and Delilah and saw this remarkably strong hero that is depicted in the book of Judges, who brought down the Philistines with his strength. And his strength was, of course, from God because he didn't cut his hair and he had been a Nazarite from birth. That became a category called Nazarite, Nazir Shimshon, a Samsonite Nazarite. And what's a Nazarite? Where does it come from? Well, it comes from this week's Torah portion, as I said, where the Torah says that if a person wants to take upon themselves a vow to become this thing called a Nazarite, the word Nazir probably comes from crown, a crown jewel, like the crown around the head. There are a lot of textual similarities between the high priest, the greatest and most holy person, and the Nazarite. So this holy person takes a vow and they abstain from anything having to do with wine or grapes. They don't cut their hair. They don't come into contact with death. Pretty extreme. And the Torah then does something very odd, which is kind of where I am today. The Torah says about this Nazarite that at the end of their period of abstinence, whatever that period's length is, they are to bring a korban chatat. They have to bring a sin offering. Not only do they have to bring a sin offering, but they're also called kadosh. They're called holy. The only such person in the Torah with the designation of being holy. So this holy person has to bring a sin offering, which of course begs the question, if they're so holy, can you all answer the question? Right? If they're holy and they're called kadosh, they're called holy. That's the designation, like holy guy, right? The only other person in Torah that's called holy is the high priest. Had to have holy to God on their forehead. Imagine that is a pretty funky tattoo, holy to God. And so Nazarite has to bring a sin offering, and yet it's called holy. That's a little bit confusing. We call that a double message. Which one am I? Am I holy or am I a sinner? So first, the nature of the sin is unclear, and then the nature of the holiness is unclear. So a number of options are available to figure this out. One theory, which is the most prominent theory in the Talmud, and then of course it's codified in Maimonides, Rambam, and others, is that the sin offering here is being brought because abstinence is not a value in Jewish life. It might be a temporary value if one needs to do it, but generally speaking, being in the middle of the road is much better. Not like I was thinking about the horses. That in the golden mean of Maimonides and in Aristotelian philosophy, one extremes are to be avoided because extremes lead towards the path that is not the path of the good. The good is being able to balance between extremes. Not someone who never gets angry, not someone who gets angry because they can't find their sock. But between those two poles and that polarity on that spectra, better to be in the middle. And sometimes the Torah recognizes that in order to come into the center and be in the middle, one has to go to an extreme, right? If I'm extreme this way, I go extreme this way. And maybe, as they imagined, you go back into the middle at the end of it all. And so the sin here is the sin of abstinence itself. Even if it has a temporary heuristic purpose, it has some means to an end. It's a extrinsically worthwhile thing to engage in. It's not the Torah's ideal. And so you bring a korban chatat. Another opinion says no. And we've discussed this in the shul over the last decade plus. There's the opinion of Nachmanides, the great Spanish commentator, who says, in fact, the entirely opposite, 180-degree perspective on Maimonides. For Nachmanides, the sin of the Nazarite is not taking the vow to abstain, but in ending the period of abstinence. Here you are, you're logged on to the Holy One, and you decide to stop after a month, right? What do you have to do? What could you possibly need to do if that is the highest value, which is to be connected to God at all times, and the Nazarite is the Holy One? Your sin is brought when you finish your period of abstinence as a way of saying, I'm sorry, I have to go. I like the opinion offered by Simcha Meir of Devinsk, great 19th century commentator, who says like this. There's never a problem, and Maimonides is always right. Judaism is not an extreme religious tradition, or if it is, it's rarely so, and it's not the general majority opinion. One should embrace the world, one should enjoy the world, one should, even as the Talmud says, one must bring a sin offering for every beautiful thing that one saw that one didn't enjoy. This is a world that was given to us. To be human is to be blessed. To be incarnate, to be of the body is to be blessed. We have no notion of original sin in our tradition. We have no notion of the guilt or the shame that would be part and parcel of what it is to enjoy this world. But as Maimonides says, sometimes we need a period of abstinence. Sometimes we need a period of removal of certain things so that we might have right relationship, to use Buddhist terminology. We might be in right relationship to certain things. And Simcha Meir Advin says, well, if you might ask me then, if my opinion is that the sin, of course, is in abstaining, why is someone called holy then? Right? That was the original problem. He says, if you look very carefully at the verses, it doesn't say that the person is holy, but that they will be holy. Not kadosh hu, but kadosh yihiyeh, the future tense. The holiness is not intrinsic as they are in the state of abstinence, but in the aftermath of it, as they come out of it, as if it's conditional on actually coming out and finding balance. So in Meir Simcha of Devinski's idea, we come to this Nazarite individual, this one who abstains. The sin is, as it were, in having to have a right relationship. It's the missing of the mark. I've gone in one extreme and now I'm needing to find the other and say, okay, great. We're going to bring a sin offering. It's not ideal. And what about being holy? Meir Simcha Devin says, nope, no problem. We'll wait and see when things resume and when you come out of this period of abstinence, whether or not you actually indeed changed your life, whether you took the lesson to heart. We'll wait on your holiness status. I love this opinion because I can't not feel as if we are literally in that moment now. For 2 years, we have been in some version of Nazarite consciousness. As a community, collectively, individually, a sense of abstaining from life because it was forced upon us. And during that time, it's possible, I don't know about you, but it's possible that we might have come to some realization about something more appropriate about our perspective on various things in this world. During that time, maybe some realizations dawned on us. Maybe at some point we realized, that we had gone in one extreme towards X and needed to go back in the other way. And we thought to ourselves, okay, I could have learned this lesson a little bit differently instead of having to not see anybody for 2 years or not talk to anybody or have masks on constantly. And I'm wondering to myself, as we come not out of it yet, but coming in a way, we're kind of leading ourselves out of the crisis. We're not yet out, but there's a kind of opening. And I could hear the Rabbi, Simcha Meir with Devin saying, we're going to wait and see if you, in fact, can be called holy. We're going to wait and see if the commitments and the realizations held. If, in fact, there won't be a rubber band effect. If, in fact, you actually will not have to become a Nazarite again and again and again and again because it didn't stick. So that's what I'm thinking about, the Shabbos. I'm thinking about that future tense. Holy you will be. United you will be. Well-adjusted you will be. More loving you will be. More just you will be. More appropriately relating to the world around us you will be. That you will be is vital. I'm just thinking about it. Because if Maimonides was right, and he often was, it's a great opportunity when we've come out of an extreme period in our lives to really go back towards the more natural and healthy middle position, to come out of extremes, to come out of all or nothing thinking, black and white, this or that, to be able to be in right relationship to the world. The Nazarite abstains, yes. Extreme, yes. A little bit not ideal, yes. But it's up to us to retroactively affirm the brilliance of the Nazarite's strategy. That's in our hands. It could be that the abstinence was for nothing. It could be that everything we did was absolutely like, the Nazarite saying, I'm never going to drink wine ever again. And within 1 week, he's drinking wine completely and he's back on, on the wagon, off the wagon, on the wagon, off the wagon. I can't tell you how many people in the pandemic told me that never again will they doubt the power of community. I can't tell you how many people during the pandemic, when Romamu and other synagogues and churches, the mosques and ashrams and all the other, right, they said, you are essential workers. Just like the essential workers are showing up and putting themselves on the line to bring us food and so on. This is an essential good that I will never, ever in my life, ever do without ever again. I get it. I really get it. I took it for granted. There you were around the corner. There you were a block away. There you were. And now I know that just that hour and a half on a Friday night, that hour and a half on Shabbat morning, oh my goodness, man, I can't tell you how many people said, how silly that I was going to Soul Cycle. What was I thinking? How could I miss this Torah service? What was I thinking? I cannot tell you how many people during the pandemic wrote to me and wrote to Rabbi Mira and wrote to colleagues. Now we get it, right? You don't know what you got until it's gone. But I found out just a little too late. So here we are, 2 years. Kadoshi, yeah, will we be holy? Will we build community again? Will we walk our talk again? Or will we slide? Think about that every single day, because the numbers are not looking good. The numbers are not looking good in synagogues across the country, in churches across the country, in other social and communal contexts across the country. It's not looking great. But I have faith. I do. I do have faith. I have faith that, as a young woman taught me today, if there's a desire for harmony, if there's a desire for peace, if there's a desire for our values, if there's a desire for the good, that desire is not going to be manifest in everybody, but in those who hunger And remember, it can happen. And even if it's unattainable, she said, it's worth striving for. Kadosh Ihyeh. We can do it. If we look back upon the pandemic, it'll be a really sad state of affairs if in a couple of years from now we'll look and say that the pandemic did not break this community and other communities. It did not break us socially because we had Zoom. And then the very thing that held us together during the pandemic was what actually condemned us afterwards. That from the pandemic, we would sit at home and say, I can't believe I'm still staring at this camera. And then we find ourselves, even when we no longer have to, continuing to do so. Won't that be a shame? Won't that be a really big shame? And any other crisis in our lives. Wouldn't it be a horrible shame if after someone we know who's quite young passes away, we say to ourselves, you know what? Man, I am telling you, I'm getting my stuff in order tomorrow. Like Rav Nachman Abresav says, we learned this today in our Hasidic Masters class. Rav Nachman Abresav, the great 19th century great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, Rav Nachman Abresav said, V'chol yom adam yachol lamut. In any moment, any day, a person can say, okay, I'm not here any longer. Hayim lo, he said, isn't it horrible? Be'einecha levazot zman al machloket. Isn't it horrible, Rav Nachman says, to waste time on fighting and on factionalism and on internecine squabbles? Spoken like someone who spent his whole life in factionalism and conflict and struggles. But he just hit us like today in our class and said, don't waste a crisis. Don't waste a period of nizirut, because it's hanging in the balance, and you and I and all of us can turn the holy that might be into the holy that is. Please rise.